Today on Muni-Cast, we're diving into the growing relationship that is taking shape across Saskatchewan, the relationship between Saskatchewan's municipalities and First Nations. Welcome to Season 10 of Muni-Cast.
I grew up in a small town. I'm a small town at heart. I moved to the city, but deep down I've not gone that far. No matter where my boots take me, I grew up in a small town and I still got one foot on Main Street.
Municast is brought to you by SUMA, the voice of Saskatchewan's urban municipalities. Municast discusses topics that are important to municipal leaders, like local governance, best practices, education, and so much more. Now, this season, conversations will dive into how municipalities can get the most value from SUMA's offerings, from building meaningful connections through networking to strengthening capacity through education, advancing local priorities through advocacy, and gaining direct access to government officials. Today, we are discussing the work between First Nations and Saskatchewan's municipalities. Whether that is promoting the understanding of treaty rights and truth and reconciliation among Saskatchewan's urban municipalities, and how the Office of the Treaty Commissioner can facilitate that relationship. We caught up with Charlie Clark, the Office of the Treaty Commissioner's Treaty Relations Lead, to discuss the work that the OTC does to promote relationship building between First Nations and municipalities, and why it's important to focus on building those relationships today. Charlie, thank you so much for chatting with us for MuniCast Season 10 here in beautiful Regina, particularly around the Office of the Treaty Commissioner, yes. I want to start with a sort of overarching question about the partnership with OTC and SUMA that they entered into last year and how that came about. So how did that partnership and that collaborative approach start? Do you know?
Yeah, it was, I think, to the credit of Roxanne from SUMA and Jean-Marc and President Randy. There was, and then because OTC has been doing work, the Office of the Treaty Commissioner has been doing work at the municipal level, especially working with reconciliation circles, and there was more and more conversations happening with municipalities about their role in work of reconciliation and some of these things. And then I came along and really, could tell we were at this really critical time in our province where flags have been raised and land acknowledgements have been done, but there's a question of what does it mean? What's the next step of building, relationships that are making reconciliation turn into more tangible partnerships and collaborations. And so I started to work with the Office of the Treaty Commissioner, and we, through Treaty Commissioner Kathy Walker and Darylyn Vickel, who was the lead at the time, started conversations with SUMA. And the idea of building an MOU, because this is a complicated answer, but the reality is with treaties, when they were signed, municipalities didn't really exist. There was a few, forts, and even the city of Saskatoon, it really started to become a settlement in 1885. The Treaty 6 was signed in 1876, and that's the case with the majority of municipalities. So the role of municipalities in treaty hasn't really been articulated. At the same time, the vision of the treaties is that it's a sacred relationship of how do we support each other to live good lives in relationship with each other and on the land. And when you have all these First Nations and towns, villages, cities, RMs, all living side by side, in many cases without a relationship, but all trying to solve similar problems, it makes sense to actually figure out what role can municipalities play in fulfilling the treaties, and how can we bring people together to solve some of these problems together instead of apart, like clean drinking water, like safety in your community, like how do you respond to an emergency, like making sure that you got good roads coming to your community. You have places for kids to play sports and to grow and have healthy lives. There is a history of nations and municipalities working together on that, but it's not nearly as strong as it could. So that's kind of, I think, the catalyst is that people are realizing flags have been raised, land acknowledgements have been done, but let's start doing some tangible things together. And I was really glad that SUMA wanted to work together with OTC on that.
Every municipal mayor or councillor I've ever chatted to always says the hardest part of any journey is the first step. Mm-hmm. Now, I know we are still in early days, and while we could probably try to solve this issue in 30 minutes on a podcast about Muni-Cast, I want to start about what can municipal mayors do today to work in conjunction with their First Nation communities or the OTC to start the conversations around regional collaborations with their First Nations partners?
Well, I think finding tangible challenges or issues, let's say you have deteriorating swimming pool or a hockey rink, and everybody wants to get better, like I said, recreational facilities, and you're trying to figure out how to solve it. See if your neighboring First Nations also are looking to do that, and to say, hey, if we got together and improved this infrastructure together, like in the Battlefords right now, they're talking about building a new hockey arena on First Nations land, urban reserve land in the Battlefords that would be jointly funded and managed by the municipalities and the First Nations together. I was talking to Mayor Dennis Helmuth from Rostern, and he was talking about how they started to connect with their Beardies and Okamasas and One Arrow in the neighborhood because they were building a new health facility. And they wanted to talk to the First Nations leadership about what would be good for them when it comes to a health facility. And they identified dialysis would be having dialysis treatment closer to the nations instead of having to drive in and out of Saskatoon, which is like a 40-minute drive back and forth, would be huge. So then they jointly went together, the chiefs and the mayors and reeves in the area, to talk to the premier and the health minister about what was going to meet the needs of the region. So finding something tangible is key. But as you might have heard from Brent Sunshine and Joe Day, the other thing is to have coffee with each other, play golf, get to know each other as human beings, and then you might find those points of connection that you didn't even realize were there.
One of the big things that we talked about with Brent and Joe, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. I'm not painting a broad stroke here, but I kind of have to for this question, so I apologize. A lot of mayors I talk to, a lot of councillors I talk to, there's a lot of ego that comes involved with municipal politics. You always want the best for your own community. I want number one for me. I want it in my backyard because it's going to benefit me. But when you're looking at a regional collaborative approach, you have to take away the ego a little bit and sort of look at it as what's good for my neighbor is also good for me. How important is that in the context of First Nations and municipal relationships to set aside ego and just talk about the issues that are important and find those common grounds that are sometimes more beneficial when you approach a provincial or federal government when you have more than one sort of stakeholder at the table?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think our province has not been well served by a lot over the past too many examples of municipal leaders, whether it's mayors or reeves, treating each other as competition and thinking they have a fixed pie, and building separate infrastructure, separate facilities, and spending way more money on redundancy. Like one example of success we had in Saskatoon is as a result of overcoming some of that sense of competition with our regional neighbors through the planning for growth, Warman, Martensville, Oser, and Corman Park. we started to work together on our planning district, and then the city wanted to build a fire training facility. Everybody needed a fire training facility. We realized it would be actually work well for us to build it outside of the city and collaborate with everybody on some of the advocacy for it, some of the funding, some of the design of it, so it meets the needs of the regional other fire departments. And then you're all gaining, from that. And you don't get there unless you get over your own ego and your own sense of territoriality. When it comes to working with First Nations, you have to add the layer of mistrust. There is a history of racism in our province. There's a history,
and let's just say not just in the province, but in Canada.
Sure, and in a lot of ways, the way that a lot of those policies that came in with the Indian Act at the same time as the treaties were signed really sowed divisions between municipalities and First Nations, because there was control over First Nations being able to be involved in the economy through agriculture. There was a pass system that restricted movements. Obviously, with residential schools, if you have a policy that's designed to eradicate the cultural language and identity, that gets infused into society, and there is mistrust and unfortunately like a dehumanizing attitude that can happen. So it takes being able to put yourself into each other's shoes, try to understand what the chief nearby is doing in their council and their staff, and then think about, well, what would we do? What could we do together better than either of us could do separately? And that's what is really exciting about what's happening with the S46, and with Brent and Joe, who you interviewed. And there's actually more exciting examples in our province than I think people realize. Right now, the city of Moose Jaw is having its main attraction, the spa and casino, rejuvenated by Pekisis First Nation. The city of Prince Albert is having their big move, their new arena event center, jointly funded with 3 First Nations in the Woodland Cree First Nations in the north. The city of Saskatoon has seen over $1 billion of investment through the 11 urban reserves we have, and downtown office buildings being rejuvenated by First Nations. And so where you can open the door and seek partnership, there is absolutely a way to get a lot more better services and infrastructure for your residents and for everybody than what you could do alone.
I want to talk about the treaties themselves, if you don't mind, for a
Great.
second. Because you're right. The treaties were signed well before a lot of municipalities were up. There were some forts, like you said. They are complex documents between the Crown and First Nations. They're ongoing. They are superseding a lot of other laws that are in Canada. As a municipality who may find this overwhelming to try to understand the role that First Nations will be playing with the municipality because of the treaties, how does the OTC help municipalities walk through the treaty process to understand what roles and responsibilities are truly there?
So actually, we have one of the mandates of the Office of the Treaty Commissioner is education. And so there is something called the Treaty Learning Journey Workshop that municipalities can take. And it's a 2-day kind of workshop that provides an overview of the history and basically an understanding of how the treaties do affect all of us. And so that's something that is there and available. There's lots of good information on the website. I couldn't recommend enough a book called The Treaty Elders of Saskatchewan that really helps to understand the principles and values behind the treaty relationship. And there's 2 that are really important, there's many that are very important, and I really need to emphasize I'm still just learning about the depth of what the meaning of treaties, and so I at the risk of saying something wrong or being incorrect, the concept of Wetaskawin, which is that the vision of the treaties is to live together peacefully and share the land. Pimachihoin, which is the vision of the treaties was that we would support each other in sharing the land and the prosperity of the land to have good lives and good livelihoods. So if you take a First Nation and a municipality that are living side by side, and everybody is there to try to create the conditions for their residents, their membership, their kids to do well, and I think understanding that the treaty relationship, while the municipalities aren't party to all of the specific agreements and elements of the treaties, they can live out the treaties by thinking about how do we support our First Nation neighbors, and how can they support us to live good lives and share the land and live together peacefully. It doesn't have to be that complicated, I guess I'm saying. And the more anybody who's...
Does it feel... do you get a sense when you talk to mayors or councillors from small towns and small villages or resort villages that it can seem overwhelming to work with anyone in some sense, because you are so... how do I use this word without disparaging anyone? The resources that some might have may not be beneficial to that partnership that a First Nation is looking for or a municipality is looking for, because they only may have one CAO, and to partner with a municipality might overextend that one person.
On the First Nation side?
Or on both municipal and First Nations.
I think that's where starting with the coffee, figuring out where you're at, figuring out what you're trying to solve, figuring out where, with Fishing Lake First Nation and the RM of Saskman, this road was getting pounded out, and it was bad for everybody, and so they, by channeling their efforts into building a better road, it wasn't a whole new endeavor to go on. It was actually a problem that they wanted to solve. I think I think finding those areas of alignment.
Are you finding more municipalities wanting to start partner with?
Absolutely. This is the thing that's been exciting about this role. Is when I was focused on being the mayor of Saskatoon, I didn't know about S46. I just heard about it. I didn't know about the Battleford Region Community Coalition. I didn't know about Larange, the town of Larange, the village of Arange, and the Lac Larange Indian Band jointly managing their water services, their waste services, and their solid waste, and their fire department. The fire chief of the fire chief of the Lac Larange Regional Fire Department, which is co-governed, is a member of the nation of the Lac Larange First Nation. And so this is part of my mission right now, is to just tell people what's already going on, so you can see, and to introduce people who are trying to figure out where to start to others who've gone down that path. And that was what the panel today was about. Because that's going to be the biggest way to learn, is to learn from people who've taken those steps and see that they're not as scary as you think. And it's exciting. And honestly, I think I can't say enough that there are a lot of, especially cities, that are having new life breathed into them because of First Nations deciding to invest there. And that's a lot of that has happened in the last 5 to 10 years. And so there's just this momentum building.
The momentum is building, and I can imagine you don't want the momentum to stop. So how can people learn more? How can people reach out to the OTC to start these conversations, or should they start locally and then go to the OTC?
Well, the SUMA has a survey that we're putting out right now to ask municipalities about your experience with this, and we'd love for you to fill out that survey so we can help figure out how to channel. I think you can reach out to SUMA because of this MOU, and we're looking at setting up some webinars to provide some experiences. I think really the most powerful thing we can do is to show examples of success, and that's where the symbolic things are important, the flag raisings and the land acknowledgements. But right now, I think we're at a stage where we want to really show what those really those benefits of really committing to work together can be. And absolutely you can reach out to the Office of the Treaty Commissioner, to myself, And we don't have all the answers for everything, and the most important thing a municipality can do if you want to build a relationship with a neighboring First Nation is show up at an event in that community and invite the chief or council members or this administrator for a coffee or bring some food to a powwow or a round dance or something that might be happening, and then start to find out where that common ground will be. And I just am amazed over and over again that even though we have this really horrible history, and we have right now First Nations in our province are facing really significant social challenges, the incarceration rates, the homelessness rates, the addictions rates. There's still always an open hand out to partner, to people who want to partner, and that willingness to be honest about the past, but still say we are. And you heard it from the panel today. We're not going anywhere. The First Nations aren't going anywhere. The municipalities aren't going anywhere. We got to figure out a way to work together. Is there, and if you go with an open mind and an open heart, I would say definitely starting with the First Nations neighbors you have, you just never know where it can take you. But you have to be willing to also not just operate. We're so used to in the municipal world operating on agendas and a bit more of a transactional kind of approach to things. And you're thinking about the outcome before you start building the relationship. And in a lot of ways, this is about thinking about that the relationship is what gets you to the outcome, and being willing to spend time on that before you necessarily know what the outcome is going to be.
Cautious of time here, but what's your message to municipal leaders that we haven't talked about yet that you want to make sure that you hit home, that they understand about what the OTC does and how it is important to start that coffee conversation with your First Nations that are around you?
Well, we have to think about what future we want for our province. Do we want a future of where First Nations and municipalities or communities are divided and afraid of each other and spending a whole lot of time and effort, building separate infrastructure, separate programming, and not feeling like we have each other's back? That's a real possible future for a lot of places. Or do we want to actually see what we can all gain from actually building together? And let's put our kids in the center of this conversation. What future do we see as better for our children and grandchildren? And it can take courage, and it can take humility to cross that and build that trust. But take that step for those generations to come, and that, to be honest, the municipalities that do are going to see huge benefits. And if you decide not to, the train is going to go by. Like, there are billions of dollars of investments happening right now in the municipalities that are building these partnerships. Talk to the mayor of Prince Albert, Mayor Polinsky. Talk to the mayor of La Ronge. Talk to Mayor Houghton or Mayor Leslie Ames from the town of Battleford, that's been a part of these conversations for a long time. There's huge opportunities for the municipalities that open their doors and their hearts and minds to partnering.
Charlie, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad we can keep sharing this vision of the future.
From the smallest villages to the largest cities, every day your urban municipality supports you. The water that travels from tap to sewer, the emergency services that keep you safe, the parks, libraries, and rinks that you enjoy. Our cities, towns, villages, resort villages, and northern municipalities are urban hubs bringing people together. We are urban. Celebrate your municipality as part of the urban family.
We now turn our attention to an organization that has been building and fostering a relationship between First Nations and municipalities across eastern Saskatchewan. Silvite 4-6 is a unique regional partnership formed to prepare for significant growth catalyzed by one of the largest private sector investments in Saskatchewan's history, BHP's $14 billion potash mine near Jansen, Saskatchewan. During the SUMA convention in April, we caught up with Board Chair Brent Sunshine of Fishing Lake First Nation and outgoing Vice Chair Joe Day, City Manager for the City of Humboldt. During our discussion, we discuss how working together has strengthened the project and what they have learned from each other.
Joe, Brent, thank you so much for sitting down with us for MuniCast Season 10 here in beautiful Regina adjacent. We're not downtown Regina, but we're not out on the outskirts of Regina. I want to start, if you don't mind. Collaboration is at the talk of the convention this year, whether that be with fellow municipalities or with First Nations. How has the collaboration between municipalities and First Nations changed over the last 10 years to where we are today, starting with Brent first?
Well, I think, when you look back, I think that there wasn't a whole lot of collaboration. I'm not saying that there wasn't any. I think there was. But I think now we're beginning to realize that First Nations and municipalities realize that they need each other, that, in a growing economy, there's a lot of pressures that happen on First Nations, but also within municipalities. And what we're beginning to realize is that, what's good for a First Nation is good for a town or an RM, and what's good for those communities are good for ours as well.
Joe, from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, as Brent said, it's that mutual collaboration is really showing that, we all need clean water. We all want good roads. We all need better childcare services. We need protective services, those sorts of things. We're all striving for the same goals, and it is so much easier to work with any of your neighbors. And if your neighbors are First Nations communities, it just makes so much more sense to work together to get these things. And 10 years ago, I think everybody, whether it be rurals and urbans and First Nations, just largely looked at their own backyard and what they could do for themselves, and weren't really looking outside of that for assistance or collaboration.
The hardest part of any journey, in my opinion, is that first step. The first part of collaboration is meeting. What is the easiest way to have that first step, whether that be from a municipal perspective or approaching a First Nation, or a First Nation approaching a municipality? Who makes that initial contact, and who do you believe, well, not who, but how does that benefit that first step in the partnership that you're seeing on the ground right now, starting with Joe?
Well, we were fortunate in that regard because BHP is a big industry player in our area, and BHP saw a need for improved childcare, improved housing throughout all the communities that are within 90 kilometers or so of their new mine site. And so they actually were the ones that made the calls initially to get the City of Humboldt, a number of urbans, a number of rurals, and a number of First Nations together for that first set of meetings. And again, there was no pressure. It was just a matter of, do you think we can do this? And that I think really helped out, because it really took the pressure off the municipalities and off the First Nations to actually take that first step on their own.
I think what we had to do once we were in a room is basically, start to take down those jurisdictional issues and maybe not focus on them as much as we needed to focus on leaving our job titles at the door and just talking as people and getting to understand each other. And again, we spoke a little bit about we all have the same needs. A lot of us, we all share the same values, and I think that's where, once the conversation started going, we realized that we really needed each other.
I just want to pick up on that for a second, because when I speak to mayors across Saskatchewan or across Canada, I often get a sense that there's a lot of type A personalities in the room, especially at a boardroom, especially when you have different opposing communities together and they're looking at the betterment of your community, but also the region as a whole. How do you do that? How do you sort of forego the ego in collaboration while looking at the regional issues or the community issues and not just the individual issues?
So what we've been able to do with S46 is basically say that, when you're at this table, yes, you're a representative of your community, but you have to take a look at the big picture and do what's best for all communities. And now with the board that we have, and we do have some oncoming new communities, we kind of set the tone that, our best interest, we're here representing S46 and not necessarily what's just best for our community. So when decisions are made, we're always considering, what's best for those smaller communities who don't have that voice at our table. So we need to always keep that in mind and keep that at the forefront. And, we have a lot of caring and compassionate, but also people who have a lot of passion. And, the passion that they have for their communities, they're starting to have that same passion for other communities as well, and realizing that this is a regional effort as opposed to, just one or two communities or the one sitting at the table.
Joe, for yourself, and I apologize if I have to ask the political question to you, but as a CAO, council's mandate is to look after your municipality, but when you're in that regional setting, is it hard to get municipal leaders to sort of think about the outside the box and not just what's happening in the community?
You know what, at the table for the Sylvite 4-6 board and the table there, it hasn't been tough at all. You're right, there are times where we have to kind of acknowledge there could be some potential conflicts, conflicts of interest if we don't kind of declare them. And just say, like, sometimes, it will be one-on-one relationships between, a municipal, or like an urban and an urban, or an urban and a rural. And it isn't that we're always going to have partnerships and collaborations with the 61 communities that are part of our group. A lot of things are going to happen and start with smaller groups, and the partnerships are going to happen there. So, no, to be quite honest, I think everybody has been able to find that, all the participants on S46 have been able to find that, this might not be the initiative that my municipality is going to benefit from, but I can still support it because I can see how it's better for the regional effort that we're trying to achieve.
For this project specifically, how do you ensure that the collaboration continues to build stronger and it doesn't just go by the wayside as, okay, we've met 3 times this month, so we don't need to meet anymore? How do you continuously build on the collaboration approach while ensuring that everyone knows what's going on?
Yeah, I think that is a challenge. There's no doubt about it, because what comes with it is there is a time resource required for everybody that attends. There's some cost to making sure it's administered properly and all that. And again, I think that largely what we've benefited from is that BHP has been behind us, the province has been behind us. I think we're starting to show some really good progress in building something that's that could be replicated in other areas and can show that there's savings overall to the province and others. And so I think that as we build this, and how do we keep the momentum going, we've started with some smaller projects, and we just need to build it from there. And again, our organization hasn't even existed for really 2 years yet, and I think we've done a lot of initiatives on childcare fronts and housing fronts and protective services, and we're just hoping to grow it from there and build that momentum and support and trust.
Brent, for yourself, same question, but I want to add on a little bit, if you don't mind. We talk about the people at the table, but collaboration just doesn't happen at the table. It has to happen in the communities as well. How important is it to bring along the stakeholders within your communities, whether that be First Nations or a municipality?
So it's all a matter, really, of perspective. I'll give you an example. Fishing Lake First Nation and the RM of Saskatchewan, we did a road project, and the real challenge of it was that we wanted pavement on this road. So pavement is, as you know, very expensive, and not a lot of communities can afford to do it. And even in our case, we had to look at what alternatives were there. Now, if it wasn't for S46, we wouldn't have been able to reach out to the community of Prairie Rose, which did 3 different roads with 3 different products, and kind of, laid the groundwork for some soil stabilization products. And with what ended up happening was we found a resource, and that's what you get from this this table is, you share the resources and lessons learned and experience, and you reach out to those other communities that have that experience, and then you're able to do a project that, we were successful on doing, and now there are a lot of other communities that want, that product within their own communities to make safer roads, and, dust is always a concern for any community when there's gravel roads, and it's really catching on.
This table seems like it's a gold standard for what a true partnership can look like when you work together. What's your advice to other First Nations who are looking at working with municipalities across Saskatchewan right now? Because you're right, there is a big push right now to bring everyone to a table to talk about regional collaboration, whether that be First Nations, RMs, or urban municipalities. So from Brent's perspective, what's your advice to First Nation communities?
So I think it all begins with what we're calling reconciliation, and we've talked about it at our table. And the things that we've said with our communities is reconciliation is a two-way street. You have to keep an open mind that, you do have challenges and things that need to be done within your nation, but, if the town beside you is struggling, it's very hard to, service your community members, because that's usually where they go for gas, groceries, if that's not available within the nation. And even if it is available in the nation, that's a benefit to some of those other municipalities too. So you need to keep that open mind and always be willing to do something else for someone else. I mean, the world's a lot bigger than just the borders of our communities. So, in order
can I
to
pick up on that
survive
for a
today,
second?
yeah.
And I apologize to interrupt because I think this is an important question, and I would love to hear Joe's opinion on this as well. The world's changed a lot in the last 15 months. Let's just put it on the table. Since January 20th, 2025, the world has kind of become more look in towards your own self and look at what's going on in Canada and how we can work together. Has the collaboration been easier since then, do you think? And do you feel like the work is getting easier, quote unquote easier, because more and more people are saying we need to look after ourselves rather than the big picture right now?
Well, I don't know if, looking after yourself is the answer, but I think that we all share the same kind of fears with what's going on in society today. So, when I walk out the door is probably the same thought as Joe when he walks out the door. What's there for my grandchildren? And that's what we're doing, is building a foundation for them to be able to work from, with all communities, with all people within the region, and kind of take that step forward. Because if we don't, then, we're only making the world a tougher place to live in.
Joe, anything to add on that?
I'm going to go back a little bit to some of your earlier discussion and questions about, building the partnerships.
Yep.
And I think it really comes down to trust, understanding, relationship building, and getting the discussions and conversations started. And absolutely, and it does not matter whether it's urban to urban, rural to rural, First Nation to urban, it doesn't matter. You have to start the discussion somewhere and start building the trust and the relationships. And
it doesn't come overnight.
oh,
right?
it does not.
Oh, no.
No.
Got a few opinions there.
And it certainly doesn't. And that's what we've recognized so much since we've been working together for the last 2 years or more, is that, we're building that trust, we're building those relationships, we're talking about things that we never would have talked about before. And again, in Brent's example of, an RM, Reeve, and him and his chief, getting into conversations about road products, it's like, when else would have that happened if this organization hadn't got up and going? And so I do think that, anytime that we can advocate that, get a group together, try and bring everybody together on neutral ground, so to speak, and start just talking about common issues and common problems. And again, in our case, it was easy to spot that, housing and childcare issues were high on the list in our area. And so it was easy to get everybody in the room and start talking about it. And once you start talking with each other, and again, whether it's me and a RM Reeve or me and Brent of a First Nation, you do begin to realize how we all have the common problems and common interests. And then you then it's easy to start working together once you start building that trust in those conversations.
You're right. Building that trust is important. Looking at the common goals is important, but everyone has common goals. And as an organization where you are looking at individual items, a strategic plan is probably top priority to ensure that everyone is going to be on the same table, so everyone can be honest up front at that first meeting or that team building exercise, that board building exercise, so everyone can be on the same page, so that you're not going away going, what are we actually doing here? Is a strategic plan and a strategic goal a priority when you're meeting in this type of collaborative approach?
So we've recently come up with our strategic sustainability plan, and I think it really builds off of us identifying our priority areas and what we want to work with and what we want to achieve. And I think it's really a real exercise in what are solutions? What are possible solutions? And like you say, sometimes it's a smaller project in a different part of the region, but you really need to champion that and take the time to learn from the experience of that. And sitting at the same table, you're not going to get that if you're not there. You're not going to get that if you don't engage. And we've been able to open up different levels of our structure in terms of the board leadership, but we also have working committees, which everybody can't sit at the board table, but there's a lot more working tables and things that can be done. And we're taking stock of all the resources that each community has, but also what we're discovering, because we get approached a lot of the time from different industries to want to get involved, but also, shows like this where you come and find some resources that you can do in your communities, right?
I'm very cautious of time here. I know we're doing this in the middle of lunch, so if people are hearing clinking and clanking on TV, that is why, because people are about to eat. What's your message to municipal leaders? I'll start with you and then First Nation leaders about how this project, has transformed not only the city of Humboldt, but the region as well.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to come back to the whole composition of Sylvite 4.6, because it wasn't necessarily one major need or one major economic development ambition that brought everybody together. It was basically industry that brought a whole bunch of communities together and said, okay, what do we have common ground and can we work together? And so I think it was very important to say that, and then basically start with, okay, so everybody within this one ring of radius is all invited to come in and share and be part of the group and that sort of thing. And for those that haven't come on and really gotten involved yet, they're still welcome to. And we keep our membership fee at just a token amount so that people can, some of these municipalities and First Nations can join anytime they want, because what we're trying to build is not just a one and done kind of approach. It's not just building one facility or trying to solve one problem and we're done. We've got, as Brent mentioned, some pillars of things that we want to look at, and housing and childcare and emergency services and trade and employment, all sorts of things that we're willing to open up and cooperate on, and it's really just a matter of trying to get to them all. But I think the message to municipalities is, maybe think about it as not just trying to solve a singular problem or create one project, but how can you work together, build the relationship to work together for a long time on lots of different issues.
For yourself, Brent, from a First Nations perspective, what's your message to them?
So I think, first of all, like one of the biggest things was, one of the biggest questions we had as First Nations is, how would we benefit from sitting at a table like this? And I think the bigger overreaching answer was, you get to sit at the table when regional planning is being decided, because all the planning and work that goes into municipal government and municipal projects affects us as nations as well, like the roads that come into our nations. That's quite important, but you get to sit at the table and really understand what the challenges are, and you realize that you're not the only one facing facing challenges as well. And, you get to share, when you're sharing that information and when you're talking with other communities, you're not doing this by yourself. And that's the big thing about S46 is, we can come out and say, well, we have this going on in our community, and, how can we deal with that? And the answer doesn't have to come from just you and your community. It can come from a shared voice and a shared opinion, whatever it may be. So, just being a part of something bigger is really making this successful.
Well, Brent, Joe, thank you so much for sitting down with us on MuniCast. It's always a pleasure to get to know the people behind the great work that's going on in Saskatchewan. So thank you so much for doing this, and I appreciate your candor and your honesty.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Well, that's the stop for today's episode. Now, if you've been riding along with us for this entire show, thank you so much for sticking around. And whether you're listening to this on a commute, doing work, walking the dog, or just letting the conversation run in the background, it means a lot that you spent this time with us. MuniCast is brought to you by SUMA, the voice of Saskatchewan's urban municipalities. So wherever you're headed next, tonight, tomorrow, or sometime down the road, remember that curiosity is a pretty good compass along the way. So thanks again for tuning in for another edition of MuniCast. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you down on Main Street.